Think we're good now. Good morning, my friends. Good morning to all. How are you doing this fine day? Today is Tuesday, October 19th, and it is 9 o'clock. Oop, I need to turn that off, or down, I should say. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that, my friends. Um, let's take care of this too while we're at it. Delete. Yes, I do. All right, trying again. Good morning. Today, for me, today is Tuesday, November 19th, and it is 9:01 a.m. Wonderful to be gathered together today in this fashion. And I say together, if it's we are gathered together, even if it's not all at the same time. Even if it's not all at the same time, because I know some of you are joining with me live. So for you, it is also Tuesday the 19th at just after 9 o'clock, while others are joining at other times of the day or tomorrow or the next day or whatever the case might be. But we're still together. We're still together in this small group, and that's what it is. We're joined together in this small group. That doesn't seem to be doing what I thought it might do. Good morning, John and Cindy. Good morning to you. Good to see you there this morning. Trying something a little different this morning, and I don't think it's going to do what I thought it might. Anyway, that's okay. So what is this? This is our small group called PB Reads the Bible. I'm PB. I'm Pastor Brian, pastor here at St. Andrew's United Methodist Church, and that's exactly what I do. I read from the Bible. You folks follow along in yours, or just listen as I read, and then I share commentary to help explain, expand it, and let you know kind of what it means, and stuff like that. Because sometimes what we think it means isn't what it means. So we share those things to help open it up, help unpack it, and then you ask your questions or make your comments as well. But I do ask people to check in, to sign in, let me know that you're there, and I see some of you are already doing it. John and Cindy did that. Good morning, Crystal. Good to have you joining with us this morning. Good morning, Maureen. I see you're watching here this morning as well. I hate that Facebook. I shouldn't say hate. I don't like that Facebook uses that word watching. I know for so many things it is. For this, you're not watching, you're joining, you're engaging. Same thing with worship on Sundays when we do it. It says people are watching. You're not watching worship. You're worshiping with us. You're worshiping with us. And you're joining in this small group. Good morning, Kim. Good to have you joining with us this morning as well. And again, I know some folks aren't able to join live. Still check in, still leave your comments, your questions, extend your greetings. Let us know that you're there, that you were watched, that you joined our session, whenever it might be. I do go back in several times to make sure I've addressed all questions and comments that people might have, and keep track of who's attendance. I've been keeping track of attendance. Spoiler alert, I haven't been doing that. We don't keep track of attendance. If we're just glad that you find it worthwhile and keep coming back, which is great. All right. So one of the things you do when you're in a small group, you share life. And so we share life together. So let me know what's on your hearts and minds, what it is that's giving you life today and what it is that's weighing you down. We'll keep you lifted and surrounded in prayer. We'll keep each other lifted and surrounded in prayer. So please go ahead, put those things in the comments section as well today. And if you're not joining live, still put them there, because like I said, I go back in and I look, and we review all that kind of stuff and keep those things in our prayers. So speaking of prayer, let's do that, right? Let's go to God in prayer right now. Good morning, God. We give you thanks and praise for all the ways you've blessed us, right up to and including this moment. It's a pretty one here in Milton, nice and sunny out, although it's on the chilly side, but of course that is to be expected at this time of year, Lord, that is for sure. But we thank you for the gift of another day. Help us to see the many, many opportunities for mission and ministry that we will encounter today. Help us to see them, and give us the strength to act upon them. We lift to you everything that's on our hearts and our minds today, Lord, even if we haven't shared anything verbally. Actually, we trust that we don't need to. You know what's on our hearts before anything crosses over our lips. So we just lift all of that to you and ask for healing and encouragement and compassion and strength wherever it is needed today, Lord. And Papa, we thank you for this chance to gather together in this way with each other and with you, because you're here right with us. We pray for your blessing upon our time together, and we lift these prayers in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right. So, yes, today for me is Tuesday, November 19th. And we will have our session on Thursday, unless something happens between now and Thursday. It's on my calendar, and I have nothing else going on this week. Yoo-hoo! On Thursday to interrupt that. So we'll still have that on Thursday. Yes, Maureen, it is indeed a sunny morning. It is indeed a sunny morning. Good morning, Jane. Good to see you joining with us today. What else was I going to say? I guess that's about it for announcements this morning, because we'll talk about other things on Thursday. Yeah, we'll talk about other things on Thursday. Okay, so we are currently working our way through the book of Genesis. And yes, Genesis is a long book, my friends. Genesis is a long book. There are 50 chapters? Yeah, 50 chapters in Genesis. And we're on chapter 18. So we're just over a third of the way through. Just over a third of the way through. Meaning we still have 2/3 to go, 66%, to finish up this chapter, the book of Genesis. Today we'll be reading Genesis 18. Helen being inducted into National Honor Society tonight. Prayers she has a good night. Oh, indeed, that is wonderful news, Crystal. That is wonderful news. And prayers for her. I'm sure she will have a wonderful night. A wonderful night. Excuse me, need a sip of my tea. Okay, so again, we're on Genesis 18. And let's see what Genesis 18 has to say. Yahweh appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah, and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it, and make cakes." Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant, who hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk, and the calf that he had prepared, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. Pause. So there's a lot going on in here. The first thing I want to point out is, verse 1 says, Yahweh appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. So that would indicate, of course, that it's like early afternoon. We might say 1 or 2 o'clock, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That would be the heat of the day, somewhere in that neighborhood, right? The hottest part of the day. Abraham's kind of relaxing at the tent, at the entrance to his tent. This is Abraham's home. It's a tent, right? It's described as a tent, but it's his home. It's his house. It's by the oaks of Mamre. And if just remember back a couple chapters, that's where Abraham settled after his most recent adventures and stuff like that. He settled by the oaks of Mamre. And yes, we're told that it's Yahweh and two others who appear to Abraham near these oaks of Mamre. So Yahweh is coming near to Abraham and stands before Abraham, standing near. He and along the others are standing near Abraham. Abraham does not know that it's God. Abraham does not know that it's Yahweh. We know that. We know that because it says Yahweh appeared. Abraham doesn't know that, at least not yet. Okay, there's really no indication. If we just stop and pause and read a little bit slower and pick up on a couple things, there's no indication that Abraham knows. Because what does it say? It says he looked up and saw 3 men standing near him. 3 men standing near him. He thinks they're just men. He doesn't realize yet that it is God, that it is Yahweh and divine beings. He only thinks of it as men. So his response, this is important, his response to seeing 3 men, we shouldn't see it as a response to seeing God, that he is extra nice because it's God. He sees 3 men, so his entire reaction to seeing these 3 men is what he would do regardless of who it is that comes before him at his house. Okay, so his willingness to bring water and bread and go so far as to slay a calf and cook that up, roast it, and bring it to these men to eat. The author of the story, the narrator, is telling us that this is just Abraham. This is just Abraham. It's really setting up not only this story, but it's also setting up something for the next story. The rule of hospitality is paramount in the ancient Mideast. The ancient Mideast, Near East, however you want to phrase it. The ancient cultures in Mesopotamia and the land of Canaan and Israel, the idea of hospitality, the rule of hospitality, the virtual law of hospitality is paramount. You needed to welcome the stranger. You needed to help people. It's a very dry land, very dusty land. Although we're told it's the land flowing with milk and honey, etc., etc. There's a lot of it's a lot of desert. It's a lot of wilderness, and you needed to look out for the travelers. Part of the reason behind this, one of my seminary professors had an interesting take on it. But she was saying that money, wealth, it was thought of, it was zero sum. They had a zero sum understanding of money. Good morning, Bonnie. Good to see you joining with us this morning as well. She said their thoughts on wealth, their thoughts on stuff is zero sum. The more I have, the less you have, and it all zeroes out. And she put it this way. She said the miracle of compound interest had not yet been discovered. So the idea of everyone having the opportunity to get a little more was a foreign idea. So rather than how much money you had in your bank account, because only so many people could have money in their bank account, and yeah, I'm using current language to express this, the idea of having a bank account of honor was much more important. Honor was something that anyone could gain and to have. One of the ways you did that was living up to the rule of hospitality, the law of hospitality. And yes, that law said you took care of strangers, you took care of travelers. If someone came near your place, in this case because he's outside the city, he's just out by himself in the Oaks, people come walking by, you offer them stuff. You offer them water. And he's very specific, right? Water for the feet. That, of course, is with Christians, with our post-Easter ears, we hear echoes of what Jesus did with his disciples for the Last Supper, how he washed the feet. Washing the feet is the job of the lowest servant, the lowest slave. It's a dirty job. Feet are ugly, right? So the idea of washing someone's feet, that's saved for the lowest part. That's, like lower than cleaning the toilet. In the ancient cultures, cleaning somebody's feet, that's how low that was. But that's the first thing that he does, is offer them water for their feet, because that's something to take care of. Clean their feet off, give them a chance to rest and relax after their journey, and prepare them for the rest of their journey, and give them something to drink, and a little bit of bread is what he says. Now, in the offering, the way the hospitality rule goes, you offer the traveler should actually say no the first time, but then you ask a second time, and the traveler again, not necessarily should, but certainly could say no. You're not off the hook until you ask a third time. So you ask 3 times to offer hospitality. And if the traveler says, declines your hospitality all 3 times, you are then off the hook. You have lived up to the law of hospitality, and you have gained honor in doing so. Now, what's unusual here is the 3 men actually agree very readily to accept Abraham's hospitality. They very readily accept Abraham's hospitality. So Abraham rushes around, and he goes and does what he's supposed to do. He goes in and tells Sarah, grind out some flour, make some cakes. Goodness, I mean, we're not talking a 2-minute job here, right? This is going to take time to prepare, and energy to prepare what he wants to do for these men. Goes and gets a servant and picks out a choice lamb and has them kill it and roast it. And so he's treating these people not just to a little bit, but he's treating them to a full meal, like a banquet almost a banquet. Oh, good morning, Fred. See you joined us this morning as well. Awesome. So it's not going over to the cupboard and opening up the pantry drawer and pulling out a loaf of bread. It's not going over to the fridge and reheating last night's supper. They're starting from scratch. That's just because, that's what you did. That's what you did. You couldn't keep food, at least not the same way we can, of course. You covered it in salt and salted it, and it might preserve it for a little while. But you didn't want to do that a lot. So he's giving them fresh bread, a fresh meal, and even, curds, right? Curds and milk, and gave them it all. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. That's the last half of verse 8. That's important because he's continuing his job as host. He's continuing his job as host. He's staying nearby. He's watching his guests. You go out to a restaurant, and a good restaurant and a good wait staff will stay attentive to your needs, right? Sometimes you get them that they're almost too attentive. They come by too often, asking how things are and asking if you need anything else. How's your water? You need more tea? You need more coffee? Can I refill your soda? Is everything okay? Is it meeting? How about dessert? You guys ready for dessert? That's what Abraham's doing. He's being that extremely good host, staying nearby, right there under the tree, watching them, paying attention to their needs to make sure that everything's okay. But he does not know that it's God and divine angels. Remember, it said in verse 2, the beginning of verse 2, saw 3 men standing there. Now, and he goes and he bows down to the ground. That's not to be seen as obeisance before God, before a deity. That's what people did. you bowed in respect and honor to someone coming along. And notice the word Lord. The word Lord is a lowercase Lord, which is just speaking of a respected man. Sometimes it would be speaking of the king, but usually it's, it could also be just a man, a respected man. He's giving honor. He's just showing honor to his guests or potential guests. So through all of this, he does not know it's God. Verse 9. They said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" Pause. So this could be a little bit of a clue. Maybe Abraham's going to start picking up on that, like, how did you know my wife's name? Right? Continuing, and Abraham said, "There in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have grown old, and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" Yahweh said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for Yahweh? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "Oh yes, you did laugh." Pause. Okay. So, notice it says, they said to him, so presumably all three of them said at the same time, "Where is your wife Sarah?" Now that should be a clue. Maybe that was a clue to Abraham. As I said, how do these guys know my wife's name, right? These aren't just regular people like I thought they were. Well, she's there in the tent. She's there in the tent, which is, obviously, it's cultural. And yes, we would not have that same type of thing. We would have been perfectly fine for her to come out and visit and say hello, especially when they asked about her. I wouldn't just say, "Oh, my wife's over there in the kitchen." No, I'd say, "Oh, hang on, let me go get her." Bring her out and introduce and say hello to everybody there, dear. But the cultural differences over the last, 3,500 years makes it different. And she wouldn't have been. Probably wouldn't have been right for her to be outside. So he said, "Well, she's in the tent. She's in the tent." And then one says, still only says one, although we know, right? "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." Now, God told Abraham in the last chapter, your wife, it's not Ishmael. It's not Ishmael. I'm going to give you a son, the son of the promise, the seed of the promise, through Sarah. She will bear a child. And we remember what did Abraham do? Abraham, it was a ROFL, today's text speak, rolling on the floor laughing. That's exactly what it says. He said he fell to the ground laughing. He was rolling on the floor laughing. He found it so funny. Whether he felt it was ridiculous or just the thought was just almost too much for him. And God says, it's going to happen, and you're going to name him Isaac, meaning he laughs. So here, the one says to Abraham, "I will return in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." What does this "in due season" mean? And it gets used again. In verse 14. "I will return to you in due season." God's promise of the son. Good morning, Karen. Good to have you joining with us today also. the God's promise of this child, and still needs to take the proper amount of time. Still needs to take the proper amount of time. The child is going to have to gestate. The child is going to be in utero, and it's going to take 9 months for this child to come into being. So, in due season. God's promise isn't going to violate the rules, so to speak, but it's going to happen in due season. Your wife Sarah shall have a son. Now Sarah is listening at the tent and says this thing. The author goes into the details. The narrator is giving these details. Abraham and Sarah are very old. It had ceased to be with Sarah in the manner of women. Yeah, she's too old. She's past. She's gone through menopause. She no longer has menstrual cycle. It's not possible, is what the author is pointing out. And she says, she laughs to herself. A little bit of a different laugh than Abraham's in the last chapter. Abraham's must have been a gut buster, because he was rolling on the floor laughing. But here it says Sarah was laughed to herself. Good morning, Charlene. Good to see you joining with us. Welcome to one and all to our small group, which is getting pretty big today. Abraham's laugh in the last chapter was this boisterous one, but gut buster, rolling on the floor laughing, ROFL. Sarah is laughing to herself, it says. But God recognizes it. But notice what she says. After I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure? You know what's she talking about? She's quite possibly or probably talking about sexual pleasure, as well as the pleasure of having the child. But it seems to more to indicate the other part of that. Yahweh said to Abraham, now we're told quite clearly, it was mentioned as Yahweh in the first words of this chapter, but then it just kept saying the men, or the one, or they. Now it's becoming more clear. We can presume at this point it is also becoming more clear to Abraham. And so Yahweh says to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Ooh. Now, we can look at this a couple different ways. You might say, well, it's just because Sarah was in the tent, and Abraham was right there, so he's just talking to Abraham, who's right in front of him. Okay, that's possible. Or it's because, well, the man is more responsible, and it's his job to keep his wife in line and stuff, and so that's why God is questioning him. Okay, possible. Here's a third possibility. Because Yahweh God has already told Abraham, you're going to have a child through Sarah. What if maybe it's because Abraham didn't tell Sarah. Why else is she so surprised and shocked and laughs at the idea of having a son if Abraham had already told her about his encounter with Yahweh in the previous chapter? See what I'm going with there? So maybe it's the fact that Abraham was keeping this a secret from his wife. And that's why, and God is saying, why did Sarah laugh? Didn't you tell her that about her encounter last week? Or whatever it was. And it says, is anything too wonderful for Yahweh? And Yahweh himself says this, right? God's own self makes that statement. Is anything too wonderful for Yahweh? The word translated wonderful, of course, can have multiple different meanings. Too amazing, too impossible is also another one. So is anything too impossible, too big, too grand, or just too wonderful, too amazing from that point of view? It can be read either way. And I think the Hebrew is being intentionally vague to let us wonder, how is that going, right? How is that going? Oh, good morning, Becky. Wonderful to have you joining us this morning as well. But God, Yahweh God, reissues the promise again and directly to Sarah, because Sarah says, "I did not laugh." So she's still. I wonder, is she still like behind the tent flap? Has she been, she's been listening through the tent, or did she finally like stick her head out or step out into the open? Regardless, she answers. She replies to God, "I did not laugh, for she was afraid." He said, "Oh yes, you did laugh." Now, when I hear that, when I read that, I picture God kind of, a sly smile. "Oh yes, you did laugh." Not anger, not an anger thing, but just yeah, you did laugh. Just wait, just wait, just wait. All right. So now we have a change in venue. A change in venue. We've finished that story, and we're going to pick up the rest of the story. It's a different story, right? Connecting to it, because we're going to be leaving from the Oaks of Mamre. Dinner's done. Conversation is done. So we think. Then the men set out from there, and they looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to set them on their way. Pause. Now, here it's very specific, Sodom, right? It's gonna say Sodom and Gomorrah, but it keeps coming back to Sodom. Thinking back a few chapters, where is Abraham's nephew, Lot? He's in Sodom. So they kind of keep coming back to Sodom. All right, starting over again. Then the men set out from there, and they looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to set them on their way. Pause. Again, being a good host, being very hospitable and guiding them. He doesn't know what's going on yet. Yahweh said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that Abraham shall become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? No, for I have chosen him, that he may charge his children and his household after him, to keep the way of Yahweh by doing righteousness and justice, so that Yahweh may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Pause. Okay, so now it's being, if it hasn't been clear up till now for Abraham, now it's definitely going to be clear. This is Yahweh. This is Yahweh, and Abraham is still like nearby, still there with him, and God says, "Shall I hide from Abraham? No, I'm not going to do that, because I have chosen him." This is verse 19. This is a very important verse. "No, for I have chosen him, that he may charge his children and his household after him, to keep the way of Yahweh by doing righteousness and justice." Your translations might say something different, because there's other words that can be translated there. Justice is probably the best understanding of that word, though, the best translation of the Hebrew word. This is saying how important justice is for God, and therefore how much injustice is antithetical to God, and how much injustice upsets God and, dare I say, pushes God's buttons, which we see in Jesus and his reaction in the temple when he's turning over, when he is releasing all the animals and makes the whip and turns all the tables of the money changers over. It's all because of injustice. It's not because they're selling things in the temple. That's a misunderstanding. That's a weakening of the power of the passage. It's about injustice, a particular form in that case, which we'll talk about sometime when we get to that passage, either here and or in worship. So I digress. Back to this. The idea of justice and injustice is paramount for God. That's it. I have chosen, and that's what he wants Abraham and Abraham's children to do, so that Yahweh may bring about for Abraham, what he has promised him. In other words, I want him to learn about and to be dedicated to the idea of justice, so that through him I can fulfill the promise. What promise? Yeah, the promised land, but the greater promise, which was to be a blessing to the nations. to be a blessing to the nations, so that I might bless Abraham and he might be a blessing to the nations through justice. Then Yahweh said, how great is the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah, and how very grave their sin. I must go down and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know. Pause. So God, Yahweh God, tells Abraham why he's there and why he's heading like in that direction, why they're heading towards Sodom and Gomorrah. Because I have heard the outcry. I have heard the outcry. We can hear in that a couple things. First of all, we can hear in that an echo just from a couple chapters ago when God heard, or actually I guess that'll be coming up because it was God saw, but God also heard Hagar in the wilderness, and is going to hear Hagar again, the God who hears. Because God hears injustice. But we can also hear a precursor, a foreshadowing of the Exodus, when God hears the outcries of the slaves in Egypt, right? Which is injustice. So God hears the outcries of injustice, and he's hearing an outcry, or she is hearing an outcry of injustice against Sodom and Gomorrah, and how very grave their sin. Now, what was their sin? Their sin was not what you might think it was. Their sin is not what you might have been taught it was. We're going to get to their sin, and actually, I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. Not homework. Let's call it extra credit for the final exam. Spoiler alert: there is no final exam. If you have a concordance, concordance is a book that goes along with the Bible, and you can look up a word and see all the places in the Bible where that word appears. Okay, so and you can get a physical book that's concordance. I got one on my shelf. Can't quite see it from here. I usually use an online concordance because those can be very good as well. Some Bibles have at least a limited concordance in the back of your Bible, giving you some things. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at your concordance and look up Sodom, look up Gomorrah, read some other places where it's mentioned. In particular, I'm going to ask you to look for mentions of Sodom and Gomorrah and their sin, very clearly their sin, in Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Jeremiah and Ezekiel. You get into the New Testament, there's some of the places in the New Testament, and it's going to talk about something else. But Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and time-wise, those are much closer to the time of when this story would have, these events, are purported to have taken place. So I would think that Jeremiah and Ezekiel might have a little bit firmer grasp on things. Also, though, check out the New Testament where Jesus talks about Sodom and Gomorrah. I think there's some interesting things in there. How things will be much kinder to Sodom and Gomorrah than to some of the people, the towns he's in. And what is he talking about? What he's talking about is basically the same kind of thing. All right. So the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is not what you thought it was. Look it up. But God says, I'm going to investigate. This whole thing is like a judicial experience. It's almost a trial, and it's investigation. God is going to investigate to find out whether or not it's as bad see whether or not it's as bad as I've heard it was. And if it is, fine, I'll take care of it because I want justice. But if it is not, then I will know. So the men turned from there, picking up from verse 22. Boy, it's going to be a long day today, isn't it? So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before Yahweh. Pause. So Abraham being like near God this whole time is important. But notice also that first it was God standing near Abraham. Now it's very clear that Abraham is standing before God, before Yahweh. Then Abraham came near and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not forgive it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just?" And Yahweh said, "If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will forgive the whole place for their sake." Abraham answered, "Let me take it upon myself to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And he said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 there." Again he spoke to him, "Suppose 40 are found there." He answered, "For the sake of 40, I will not do it." Then he said, "Oh, do not let the Lord be angry if I speak. Suppose 30 are found there." He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." He said, "Let me take it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there." He answered, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it." Then he said, "Oh, do not let the Lord be angry if I speak just once more. Suppose 10 are found there." He answered, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." And Yahweh went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. Pause and end of chapter 18 as well. Diane, good morning, Diane Harris. Welcome to us this morning as well. So this whole piece here is, like I said, it's judicial, and it's almost like a courtroom scene. It's almost like a courtroom scene. And Abraham, let's see this almost as two friends talking, though, too, at the same time. Abraham is bold. Yeah, Abraham is bold, but Abraham sees Yahweh as his friend. They've developed this relationship. God has made these promises to him, has appeared to him multiple times. He feels safe enough in questioning God. I love this story because this is the reaction that Abraham should have. This is the reaction that Abraham should have. This is the reaction that we should have as well. There's nothing wrong with questioning God, with arguing with God, especially over matters of justice or injustice. So Abraham is pointing out God's justice. God's justice. You're the judge of all the earth. Surely you're going to do what is just. Would it be just to destroy everyone because you couldn't find 40 nice, righteous people, good people? And he keeps lowering the number. And this is, and presumably they're talking about Sodom, because it specifically says the men went toward Sodom. The men are going toward Sodom. And it says in here, if I find it Sodom, 50 righteous in the city. So it's Sodom. Who's in Sodom? Lot. Who does Abraham not mention by name? Lot. So is he concerned about Lot? Presumably so. But his concern goes beyond just Lot, because he's concerned with what is just. He's actually living up to what God said he wants him to do, and what he wants him to be, and what he wants him to teach his children coming after him, to do righteousness and justice. So Abraham is actually prodding God towards justice. I think God wants this the whole time. God doesn't want him to just blindly accept whatever God's decision is going to be. And I'll hold off on the rest of that until we get to another story in a few chapters, okay? So he keeps lowering the number. You, of course, had heard the expression, like, one bad apple ruins the whole bushel. That's true. And Jesus speaks about a small amount of yeast can ruin the whole batch. True. But this story would also seem to indicate that the opposite can also be true. That a small amount of good, a small amount of righteousness, a small amount of justice, a small number of people who are practicing righteousness and justice, keep coming back to justice in particular, can improve the whole thing, can make everything better. But even that has a limit. Even that has a limit. And so we've gotten down to the bare minimum. It needs to be, what is that? A critical mass. Critical mass. And maybe 10 is the critical mass, or the lowest that could be in order for that to happen. And Abraham knows that that's as far as I can go. And that's why. All right. So what happens next? Right. Well, we'll find out on Thursday. Thursday we'll read chapter 19. Thursday we'll go over chapter 19 of Genesis. It'll be 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock on Thursday. So don't forget your homework, your extra credit for the final exam. Yeah, spoiler alert, there is no final exam. Or if there is, I'm not in charge of it. So thanks for joining our small group today, or whenever it is you've joined. And I do pray that it's been beneficial, that you've learned something, relearned something, that you've maybe had your eyes open about something, or got angry about something. That's okay too. So thank you for being here. I pray God's blessings upon you. When you see, keep your eyes and ears, physical and spiritual, open to everything our living, loving, active God is doing in your life. Say thank you, and then tell somebody about it, including me. So until we meet again, my friends, be blessed. Be blessed. Bye.